Tuesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Browns Players' Day off. Getting ready to face the Bengals Sunday. Tony Rizzo, longtime ESPN Cleveland voice on the radio. His thoughts about where the Browns are and where he thinks they should head.
If Jimmy Haslam said to me, Tony, how would you advise me moving forward? I would tell him we're gonna break things up. And we're gonna go in a new direction. It's time to give it a try. The way the Haslams have their organization set up, I think, is antiquated. They feel like it's state of the art, and really, it's not. It's not at all. Here's what you need: you need a strong coach, and you need a football guy who listens to analytics. That would be my plan. Not 15 analytics people and a guy that's only analytical driven and a coach who can't make any decisions for himself.
With that, let's welcome in Tom Withers from the Associated Press. So Tom, again, 3-win seasons, you look at everything. And just as a point of reference, both Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry report to Jimmy Haslam. The analytics reference is to Paul DePodesta. I think you have to look at everything, just where you're at from training camp to what you do in the preseason. You've had injuries, penalties, and a number of things that have been, and it's not just a one-year thing with the injuries and the penalties. That's been multiple years.
Yeah, I don't know. Hi, Dave. Merry Christmas and happy holidays, by the way. Yeah, there's so much to unpack in a season like this where you're right. I mean, there's so many variables at play here, bad quarterback play, sticking with a quarterback that you're married to for at least another couple of years, unless you can figure out a clever way to file the divorce papers. You've got the injuries, as you mentioned, valuable players, not only your starting quarterback, but arguably the guy who was playing better than anybody on defense in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and missing him for a length of period. Obviously, the Nick Chubb injury on Sunday, on and on, an offensive line that was banged up at the beginning of the year. So there's a lot to consider when you're talking about making change. Now, I would caution people to remember, too, that this was a team that won 11 games last year despite starting 4 quarterbacks. You have a coach who has won Coach of the Year 2 times in 5 years. This is an organization that has had 18 double-digit loss seasons since 1999. So it's not like we haven't seen 3-11 before. So, this idea that this team was on the cusp of a Super Bowl and stuff, I think is getting a little too far ahead of ourselves here. And I think maybe the expectations didn't match what this roster actually looks like coming into the season. That's probably everybody's fault for maybe an over-evaluation. But in terms of what they're going to do once this season unravels, it seems to be that they're putting out some information that they want to stand pat in terms of the coach and in terms of the general manager, and I would support that. I think these guys, you don't want to give any mulligans, and I know nobody wants to talk about asking Cleveland fans for more patience because patience has run out. Patience ran out a long time ago. But this is also an organization that brought back a coach who went 0-16 and 1-15. So I don't think there's this quick trigger approach that we've seen in the past. I think the Haslams will, look at everything, obviously. I think in terms of Kevin Stefanski, what has got to be said in a positive light is that he seems to still have the attention of the guys, the men in the locker room. The team is still playing hard. They're just not playing well. We're on the verge of probably another quarterback change here as we head into the final 3 weeks of the season. So in terms of, tearing the whole thing down and rebuilding again, I don't think that's the way they go, and I don't think that's the approach that they should take.
No, I would agree, and we'll get into this a little bit later in the show. I would agree. Sure. It's more of a moderate rebuild as opposed to a total rebuild, and we'll get into that a little later.
Sure.
You did mention Jameis Winston has struggled with turnovers. Kevin Stefanski non-committal about who will start. Be it Jameis Winston, Dorian Thompson-Robinson Sunday against Bengals. Which way would you go?
I think you have to make the switch at this point, Dave. Winston, for all the good that he's done, and he's been, particularly marvelous off the field in terms of the way he's led this team and the way the guys have rallied around him. At a time when you lose your starting quarterback and this guy steps in and for a few weeks. Looks like he was going to resurrect his career. But when you throw 8 picks in 3 games, and they're the kind of picks that they were, I mean, the one that went off Nick Chubb's hands is somewhat forgivable. That ball either hits the ground or Nick corrals it. Not a great throw. Don't get me wrong. He's probably got to put it on his chest there, but a pick nonetheless. The other 2 into the end zone are pretty inexcusable. The one problem I had with the first one, though, if we want to get into the weeds on those 3 picks on Sunday, is that the first one, which was a shot from the 36-yard line, I didn't mind, except that the Browns were moving the ball at the time. And then the shot you take down in the middle of the field is to Elijah Moore, who's not going to out-jump anybody for that touchdown. So I'm not exactly sure what they're thinking on that play. And then on one in the end zone, there was a lot of traffic over in that corner. Clearly a forced ball. Clearly the last one that Kevin Stefanski was willing to stomach. So he made the switch to DTR on Sunday, who played, what you would expect over, the last 7 minutes and 50 seconds of that game. Threw a pick, threw a nice ball as well for a completion, and looked good. And I think it's time now that, you got to start thinking about what does our quarterback room look like going forward.
Yeah.
Is Deshaun Watson. Yeah, I'm sorry. And if Deshaun Watson is coming back and is going to get a chance to start, well, you got to figure out who's going to be in there with him. And I think DTR has earned the right to at least get a good look.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. This is interesting though. So to this point in the season, there are 5 players in the NFL with over 1,000 yards receiving. You got Jamar Chase, you got Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy. You also have Amon-Ra St. Brown who reached 1,000 yards. So Jerry Jeudy has really picked it up, and Tom, most of those yards have been with Jameis Winston at quarterback. So I would say that's something to keep an eye on. Is Jeudy still productive if you switch over to DTR?
Yeah, I would think he would be, because I think that's where your game plan is going to be designed, right? I think they've identified now that Jerry Jeudy is a keeper. I mean, they, for everybody's criticism of Andrew Berry, and rightfully so, there's a lot of things to question about what he's done over the last couple of years. The Jerry Jeudy trade looks good. I mean, they brought in a guy who could arguably be your number 1 wide receiver going forward. And clearly, once they made the move with Amari Cooper, it was Judy's chance to step up, and he's done so. And Winston has found him, and they've had a good connection, and that looks very positive, going forward. I love Jerry Jeudy coming out of Alabama. I thought he was absolutely going to be a number 1. And, as we saw, we've seen this so many times, I guess maybe a change of scenery was what he needed. And he seems to really be, enjoying this role here. He's getting guys open. Just being on the field, it creates a problem for defenses, whether they're throwing the ball or not, or he's targeted or not. He's somebody you've got to account for on every single snap. And so I think that's a real positive going forward as far as what the receiving group is going to look like in the future.
All right, so this is from ESPN. Power rankings entering Week 16. They have the Browns 25th in the NFL. Biggest improvement, penalties. Browns flagged for 6 accepted penalties against the Chiefs. They've generally been more disciplined recently. That's after weeks 1 to 7. Cleveland flagged for the 3rd most penalties in the NFL, including a league-leading 45 offensive infractions. Tom, any way you slice it, penalties and turnovers have been a huge problem. The question is, who does that fall on? Some of it's got to be the coach. Some of it's got to be the players. I'm sure they're not coaching them to line up offsides. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It's not a good look for Kevin, right? It's not a good look for his staff when you have that continuing problem, which has been since week 1. I think they had 11 in the loss to Dallas. So I thought it was interesting after the game that Stefanski pointed out that officiating crew on Sunday has a tendency to be a little bit flag happy, and they certainly caught the Browns. But there's nothing to excuse the pre-snap penalties. This has been a problem going forward. I think some of it also has fallen on having new personnel out there. I mean, Prochet, I think, was called for a couple on Sunday where he's lined up wrong. And I know that's been an emphasis this year, illegal formations and shift violations and all that stuff. So that's something that they've got to button down. And yeah, when you're putting the ledger together of pros and cons on Kevin Stefanski, that's certainly not a good one for him.
All right, before we go to break, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason for the first time today.
I heard the gentleman talking about a butt-kicking coach. Is that what you need? What are you talking about? Andy Reid, I've seen Andy Reid. He's gotten in guys' faces on the sidelines. It's called holding people accountable. You don't sit there like this idiot we got and just say, I expect. Because that's all he does. Well, you're expecting what? To get better just by saying it? You got to coach a little bit. You got to do something. We've done the same thing now for 2 years. We lead the league in penalties, turnovers, all kinds of crap. And this freaking idiot's still our coach. Where are you guys coming from? We don't need a different coach. You got to try something, and this isn't it. You guys are ridiculous.
As always, we appreciate all of the voicemails. One of our frequent voicemailers. Again, what are you going to do? You change the coach, you change the general manager, you have to overhaul the roster. That's the way it works. They made the playoffs last year. So, again, that's one of the questions in the offseason. Is the roster closer to last year, or is this the true roster? I'll listen. Yeah. I'll listen to those arguments now. I didn't want to hear them when they were 11-5. When they've won 3 games, I'll listen to them now.
Yeah. Also remember too that ownership gave the coach and the general manager contract extensions this summer, so they believe in them to some degree, right? And I think things have obviously fallen apart here of late, and I get it, and I understand the fans' frustration. I don't think Kevin Stefanski's an idiot. I think he's an excellent coach. And I think people sometimes get too caught up in what they see on the sideline in terms of, a player or a coach's comportment. That's not necessarily what goes on behind the scenes. And as I mentioned earlier, I think Kevin Stefanski has this team's attention. And I think and this is what I do because it's my profession and my job, I actually talk to the players about how they feel about the coaches. And even talking off the record to players, they talk about how well organized Kevin is, how he's the same guy every single day. People want to talk about, he should show more emotion on the sideline. Look, there's plenty of ways to skin a cat. And some coaches go by the more cerebral approach. Some like the piss and vinegar type approach, throwing things, throwing a tantrum on the sideline. That's not going to do anybody any good at this point. I think players appreciate that they know where they stand with Kevin Stefanski on a daily basis. And, there's all this talk now that you need an ass kicker like Dan Campbell. Well, it looks great to have a football coach out there who's acting a particular way, but I don't think that's necessarily that makes him a better coach than anybody else.
No, and you have to be who you are. That's who Dan Campbell is. Andy Reid doesn't air people out in public either. So that nobody really does that in the NFL. This isn't 70s, 80s, 90s. So again,
I mean, sorry to interrupt, Dave. Let's take Bill Belichick for instance. Bill Belichick was a hard-ass, hard-edged coach. He wasn't demonstrative on the sideline. Would he go over and get into a guy's grill when he needed to? Yeah. So I guess I got news for you. So does Kevin Stefanski. So, this idea that he's got to be out there, grabbing guys by the face mask or whatever people it is that they want to do. Like you said, you got to be yourself on a daily basis.
Yeah, and players can see through that when you're not. So Tom Withers and I can step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Head.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries home for the holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Browns with Tom Withers from the Associated Press. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
After this loss, it's obvious that Jameis Winston isn't going to be the answer. So I'm sitting here thinking I'd call up the Raiders to see if they would be willing to part with either Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. Both of them have proven to be competent quarterbacks, and what we need is competency while we try to figure out our quarterback situation, and the Raiders are obviously going to draft a quarterback. So I'm calling to see if I can give maybe a couple late-round picks to acquire either Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew to come in to at least stabilize our quarterback room until we figure out what is going on. Just my thoughts. Hopefully we can get a couple more wins before the season ends. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tom, I'm not sure that Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, Minshew, he might be intriguing. I don't know that he fits the system. If there's no good answers to this question because there's not, you can't spend any money. Go get me a quarterback for $10 million, Alex.
Yeah, much easier said than done, right? When you have this situation that they do, financially, they're in a bad spot in terms of trying to fix this quarterback situation. Now, can they get out from underneath the Watson deal? I'm sure there's a way. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I'm glad that's not my job, but I do know that they have a wing of analytics people over there in Berea that are working on those kinds of things. So yeah, listen, once the season wraps up, obviously they've got to start thinking about what that position looks like last year. If anything, if this year, as much as any has underscored, is how important that position is, which we've all known for a long time. And this is Cleveland, and we've got a roster of 40 starting quarterbacks or whatever it is now since 1999. So, clearly they're going to have to figure out what it is they want to do next year. Is it a bridge quarterback that gets you to a guy that you're going to draft in the first round? Is there a quarterback in this draft that stands out amongst others that you're willing to move forward to get? I don't know. I watch these kids on television each week like everybody else does out there, and a couple of them look real intriguing, and a few of them, there's some guys that are probably going to be taken in the third or fourth or fifth round that are going to end up having 10-year careers here in the NFL. It's just the way that it works. So, going forward, I think it's pretty obvious that this next 3 weeks will be an audition for Dorian Thompson-Robinson to see if he could be part of that potential group for 2025. And then you go right back in the same pool that you fished in this year in terms of finding another veteran or two, right? And I don't think the door is necessarily closed on Jameis Winston coming back in some form, whether he's as a backup or a number 3 or somebody good to have in the building. I don't think that's out of the question at this point. I mean, clearly, you can't be turning the ball over 8 times in 3 games and hope to keep a steady job with anyone. So, listen, there are so many unknowns and so many options going forward. And, I do think that obviously, as has been the case up until two or so years ago, quarterback is a priority in this town once again.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're back on the quarterback the quarterback wheel that just keeps going
Carousel, never stops.
Round and round. I feel like we're mice running on the little treadmill in a cage. All right, PFF finding sources of hope for the NFL's worst teams entering 2025. Browns, a fresh start at quarterback and defensive talent. Browns have parallels with the Giants. Yikes. That this offseason may finally afford them chance to shed a deadweight contract at quarterback. I have a feeling that, and we've heard that Deshaun Watson's probably coming back, and they're going to probably bring competition. The one thing I would say about that, it needs to be competition. I don't think you can, based on the way that he played this season, it's got to be an open competition where you just throw it out there and whoever plays well is the guy you go with.
Yeah, totally agree, Dave. I mean, for those of us who watched Deshaun Watson during the summer, I had my doubts about the way he was going to play, and particularly when I found out more about that shoulder injury, which was a major surgery that he had. And I was, I gave him credit for being able to come back and be available for them. But it did worry me when, even watching him in training camp, he was not stepping into throws and throwing it downfield. And then obviously when you then take into account, the time off that he's had over the last couple of years, the fact that he's only made 20 some starts in the last 4 years, there's a reason why he played the way he did. So I agree with you, Dave. I think it does have to be an open competition. I don't think anybody's going to come in. Well, first of all, if they draft a quarterback in the first, second, or third round, that's going to be a guy that they look towards the future, but that's not somebody you're handing the keys to the car to on day one next year. So yeah, I think you're going to have an open competition, whether it's if Deshaun Watson's involved in it or not, I don't know, but I think you could end up seeing, 2 or 3 guys competing for that starting gig once we get towards mini camps and OTAs next year.
Yeah, I think they have to. The other thing that's really, when I look at this season, Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward are having great years, and it's getting overlooked. So take a look at this. Garrett leads the entire NFL in pressures with 70. Second highest win rate on the season at 24.4%. And he's also doing it while facing the highest double team rate in the league at 29%. Again, Browns fans seem to underappreciate what Garrett is doing. Maybe because we're watching it so often. This guy's having another elite season, and it's getting lost because he's playing for a team that's won 3 games. Same thing with Denzel Ward. Denzel Ward might be having one of the better seasons of his career.
We've been spoiled by the LeBrons and the Jose Ramirez's and the guys that do it at the most elite level that there is. And that's where Myles Garrett has been playing for the last 2 years. I marvel every week, Dave, at when you really focus on him and you see what he has to deal with on sometimes a snap after snap basis, where he's taking on the left tackle, who's typically, the best offensive lineman on that team, right? And then he has to fight through either a chip from the tight end or a running back who's waiting for him or a guard who's sliding over. There was a play on Sunday where he got blocked by 4 guys on one play and still managed to make a pressure. And I'll give Myles a ton of credit because he's played hurt. He was dealing with some foot issues early on this year that he didn't want to talk about. He really never used as an excuse. He's taken some time off during the week, in terms of Veterans Days that he's earned to not practice. So he was, as close to 100% as he could be on Sunday or Thursday night or Monday night or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, unfortunately, I think you're right, Dave. I think, a great season by him and a great season by Denzel Ward, who is playing as well as any cornerback in the NFL, have kind of gone to waste. And that's really a shame. But, that's also something that, you can look toward as a positive if you'd like to. I hate to think of the fact that you've wasted some of these prime years of some of those guys, but they're 2 of your cornerstone players. And so, when you talk about the roster, it's about adding guys that are going to help those guys, maintain at the level that they're at, and which is right now, 2 absolute all pros.
All right, before we go to break, Nick Chubb's season ends with a broken foot, and
yeah,
I don't know about you. I thought he flashed a little bit of explosion that maybe was missing the last couple of weeks. So, one, do you think he comes back? I think they try to find a way. He seems to want to come back. I think they find a way to get him back. And what have you thought of Jerome Ford?
Yeah, on Nick first, yeah, he'll be back in some form. I mean, obviously, they went out of their way to restructure his contract last year to make it team friendly and to give Nick another chance to resurrect his career. And I would not put anything past Nick Chubb. And if you listen to the way his teammates and his coaches talk about him, that's all you need to know. And I agree with you, Dave. I thought there were a couple plays last week where he showed a little bit of that burst. Whereas a week earlier at Pittsburgh, I thought there were a couple of running lanes that the old Nick Chubb would have been 20 yards further downfield before he got hit, and he just didn't have it. But that's from what we've seen over the years. That's fairly common in those kinds of injuries, particularly one like his, which was the second major reconstruction of the same knee. So hopefully this broken bone is nothing more than some kind of a fracture that will heal. Shouldn't really impact him whatsoever. And then he comes back and can get close to what he was, because, watching number 24, I don't have to tell anybody out there, was about as fun as it gets. In terms of Jerome Ford, yeah, I've been, really excited to see him kind of step it up here the last couple of weeks. Obviously, he's going to get a heavier workload here over the last 3 games. So we'll see a little bit more out of him out of the backfield. But he's also had an impact on special teams the last couple of weeks with 2 kickoff returns. And I like everything about Jerome Ford. I think he's, been a player that can really, develop even into more than what he showed at this point. Excuse me.
Tom Withers and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. We can continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Try C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE with Tom Withers from the Associated Press. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yeah, Jim from Columbus again. I called in last week. I gave my assessment on Stefanski, Berry, and DePodesta, and basically said that their judgment is terrible. They need to go, and you pretty much told me I was wrong. And yet today you're saying, well, Brown should hire somebody to check out quarterbacks. So you're saying that Berry is not able to do that. He's not capable of it. And I will agree with you on that. My bottom line is get Berry, DePodesta, and Stefanski out of Cleveland. Bring in a guy that knows football, even Louis Riddick, whoever. Somebody's out there that knows their stuff. Get rid of these three. That's all I got.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tom, again, I respect that opinion. You can't when you've won 3 games. I get it, and we'll dive into this a little deeper. The one thing I would say is, if you change the coach and you change the general manager, it is a sweeping overhaul of the roster. Sweeping overhaul of the roster.
Yeah, to me, David, to gut this thing right now would be foolish. I think, it would be going against everything you've tried to do the last 2 or 3 years, which is to build some depth. And this idea that Andrew Berry doesn't know football, that's just nonsense. I mean, with all due respect to the voicemailer, I mean, Andrew Berry will have forgotten more football by tomorrow than you'll ever know. With all due respect.
Well, the other thing that I'll tell you, Pete Prisco of CBS Sports, who knows him, said he gets labeled as an analytics guy. He's a football guy. Is from the Eagles tree, the Howie Roseman tree that everybody kind of sits down and bows down at. He's a football guy who listens to analytics. Now, you can quabble about picks and all this. Remember, traded for Jerry Jeudy, traded for Amari Cooper. So he's went out and identified 2 number 1, in theory, 2 number 1 receivers back to back.
Yeah, and the drafts, listen, we can pick apart anybody's draft, right? And I think if you look over the last couple of years, he's taken some guys that, maybe were reaches, if you want. Jedrick Wills has shown flashes. He's been hurt the last couple of years. Greg Newsome, shown flashes. He's been hurt. Martin Emerson, I think we could all identify as a player that could potentially help you down the road. He's hurt again. There's hits and misses with every team. Obviously they become amplified here when, the losing continues, when you have suspect or worse quarterback play, and you get into the situation that you're in. So, listen, as we've talked about here for the last few minutes, I think a complete overhaul is unnecessary. I think you do have the right people here. I think the Browns ownership believes they have the right people here. I think they look at this year as, a little bit of a hiccup, whatever you want to call it. They're a 3-11 team, and somebody's going to have to be accountable for that. Somebody's going to lose their job. They're going to make some kind of changes. What I didn't understand, Dave, last year was the drastic overhaul that they made with the offense in terms of getting rid of Alex Van Pelt. I thought that was interesting. And I didn't think it was necessarily needed as well, but I knew that they were trying to do something different, with Watson and to try to utilize his skill set better. It backfired. And let's be honest, that decision alone is the reason that you're in the spot that you're in right now. It is because of the swing and miss you took with that franchise quarterback that has led to all of these things and has amplified all of these various aspects that you're talking about with this team. So again, I think changes will come. I don't think they have to be major ones.
All right. So here's another look at people that want to move on. So this is the argument. They want to know what the argument is to keep Kevin Stefanski. And here's what they say is against it. Laundry list of failures. Most pre-snap penalties in the NFL 2 years in a row. Worst contract And the trade, they're referring to Watson. 12 draft picks no longer here. Bad new coaching hires. So the question that I have is, relative to the new coaching hires, was Kevin Stefanski told, you got to build around Deshaun Watson? I was for that. It clearly didn't work. Bill Callahan, probably the most egregious of those, wanted to go coach for his son, and you weren't going to stop him. He was going to retire if you didn't let him go. So that's fine. 12 draft picks no longer here. You're picking in the 3rd and 4th round. The hit rate of those is about 20-some%. So, and you might have hit first-round talent with DeJuan Jones and Martin Emerson. The trades for Amari Cooper and also Jerry Jeudy that people don't like. The contract for Amari Cooper. I'm giving you the laundry list of the positives. And the trade for Jerry Jeudy and signing him to a contract that now looks really friendly. They've been ahead of the curve most of the time. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, trading up to get him. Now he's hurt. So you can weigh pluses and minuses. The reason I wouldn't rebuild it, you've got playmakers at all 3 levels of the defense. You got Garrett, you got Ward, you got Owusu-Koramoah. Looks like Jerry Jeudy can play. Looks like Jack Conklin can play. You better go find a quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over, because the last 2, even Joe Flacco that everybody wanted back, he turned the ball over way too much. Jameis Winston, same story. But that's why I wouldn't rebuild it.
I agree with all of that. And I will add, no first-round draft picks the last 3 years, right? Think about how different this team could look if you had, whoever it was at quarterback, and you went a different route other than, mortgaging the farm on Deshaun Watson. So, yeah, again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, Dave, but I listen, 3-14 is going to be hard to accept, and it's going to be hard for a team, from a public standpoint to say, yeah, we're going to run it back with this crew after going 3-14. I don't think it's going to look exactly the same as it does this year. And I understand that people are mad. What I don't understand is why people weren't mad a long time ago. I mean, this product has not been good for the better part of 25 years here, and still people are going to the games. And until you start to show ownership that as a loyal fan, you only take so much, well, then you got to stop buying season tickets, and you got to stop attending games and giving in year after year if you're that outraged by it. I don't think you need to be. I think that's an unhealthy way to live. And I do think there's enough good things here, Dave, to kind of keep it going. See what you can do. Like, if you're going to invest in your coach and your general manager this past summer with contract extensions, that's a sign that you think that there's something good happening here. And yeah, can you make some tweaks? For sure. Are there some issues that Stefanski's had that need to be cleaned up immediately? Without a doubt. But I think the bottom line has been that this quarterback situation has been untenable for a couple of years. It has divided the fan base, and we're in the spot that we're in for that reason, and that reason more than any other.
And I have no issue with the trade is what put you behind the 8 ball, without question. You gave up the 3 first-round picks. It hasn't worked out. They swang for the fences, and they missed, which is
struck out.
I have
Absolutely.
no issue with that, given what you're trying to do with quarterback. I'd rather have them do that than sit here and go, well, we got a quarterback we can't really do much with, but we're going to do the best.
You picked the wrong guy,
right?
I mean, it was okay. It was okay to figure that. Look, for us to compete with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow and on and on and on in the AFC, we needed the guy. They thought they got the guy. He wasn't the guy. So guess what? That's what you got to fix, and you got to fix it quick.
Tom Withers, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Have a great holiday. Appreciate you joining us. Thanks, Tom.
You too. Thanks a lot, Dave. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Tom. That's Tom Withers, Associated Press. Always really good Browns coverage. We're going to take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Fred Greetham from the Orange and Brown Report. We'll continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yes, good morning. I just wanted to throw my 10 cents out there about Deshaun Watson's contract. Since the NFL is not going to suspend him and nothing else is going to work in our favor to get out of this contract, here's the negotiation that I would suggest. We will pay you the $46 million a year for the next 2 years that we owe you, but you will not be around the team. You will be sitting at home doing nothing for 2 years. If you want to continue playing football, you're going to have to forego these 2 years. Let's work out some kind of deal where we can both win, and then you can go play wherever you think you can get a job at. I don't know if he would go for that or if he'd just be happy getting the money, but it's better than cutting him and having to absorb that huge dead cap hit. All right, that was my 10 cents. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Fred Greetham, Senior Analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, if that works, anything you can do to minimize that contract is probably what they're going to try to do in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get a little insurance relief, but not enough to offset. I think the biggest thing is everybody's scratching their head trying to find what a lot of people don't understand is cutting him or trading him or anything like that accelerates where you pay it all up, and the reason you can't cut him or trade him, first of all, somebody'd have, even if you paid a lot of the salary, that all hits you much sooner. If you have him, you have it built into your budget and you just work around it. You do what you did, you restructure it again. And I think it's something like if you restructure next year, it'd be about $37 million. Then you have, the big hit the following year, but the salary cap keeps going up. There's no real good option. But if you do it all at once, you absorb everything at once, and then you can't add anybody for next year. It's something like $119 million. Say the salary cap's $255. Almost half your money is allocated on one guy. You got 52 others. So by spreading it out, and you're going to have a big year, probably if they do it this way in 2027. But the hope is salary cap just keeps escalating and you have something else in place and you just move around it. I know everybody just wants it gone, but there are consequences. And there's consequences on saying you're not going to play or you're not going to compete. You're done. Go sit in the corner. They might be thinking that, but you can't say that. I mean, there's the NFL Players Association. There's a lot of things involved. So, I mean, they could tell you, Dave, that you're going to compete for the starting job. Doesn't mean you're going to get the job. So that's what's in play is, believe me, they see what's going on. I mean, the evidence, not only with Joe Flacco last year, prior to that, you could even go back to Jacoby Brissett, but Joe Flacco last year, and then you wanted to look at a healthy Deshaun Watson this year. You gave him 7 games. Okay, you saw what you saw. And then say what you will about Jameis Winston interceptions. He averaged over 300 yards in his 7 starts. There's a difference night and day, so he might not be the answer, but when all is said and done, I mean, I think you have a before and after, and all you have to do is look in between, and I don't care how you slice it. It isn't all, worth going back to.
All right. So you mentioned Jameis Winston. More interceptions, 3 more interceptions against Kansas City. So it's likely that it will be DTR against the Bengals. There are reports out that is the case. So let me ask you this. Jameis Winston can be a free agent. Here are some others. These are top 25 free agents as delineated by CBSSports.com. So the first one they have is Sam Darnold. Darnold has played well enough to demand a sizable contract, will be just 28 years old, start of the 2025 season. They're talking about the $30 to $40 million range potentially for Darnold. 10th on this list is Russell Wilson, currently starting for the Steelers. Since becoming a starter, Wilson is 6-1 in Pittsburgh, first place in the AFC North, also a completion percentage, 64% of his passes, a 103.9 passer rating so far. Again, he's due to be a free agent. Also on this list, number 18, Justin Fields. Flashed throughout his career, mostly with his legs, still yet to put it all together to convince a team that he is a quarterback that you can build around. So, Fred, when you look at those are the free agent varieties. Darnold, Wilson, Fields, and Winston. I guess you could throw Carson Wentz, who, the Chiefs. Do any of those excite you? Do any of those seem like that's a realistic or a good option?
No, I mean, I was a little surprised with the way Wilson played this year. But to be honest, I thought he played well when he beat the Browns in 2023. He always seems to play well against the Browns. Maybe that's just the thing. But yeah, I don't know why the Steelers would let him go because we talked about their defense very strong. They go to 10-7 last year with bad quarterback play, Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, and they just make a change there, kind of get both of those guys, hoping between one or the other they'd be able to, win, and it's worked. And so I don't know why they'd change anything unless they come to an impasse, and it'd probably be, with Fields. I actually didn't want Fields to go to Pittsburgh. I thought he could be pretty good. I think he's an option, for the Browns. But if you could just get one of those, I'd probably get Russell Wilson. Sam Darnold, I think he's now played himself where they're asking for, $100 million type of contract. And so I don't know. I don't know if the Browns, are interested in that type of a deal. So I don't know. None of them are really good situations. Again, I've said this, Kevin Stefanski, if he's going to be the coach, I think he needs to be involved and find somebody that he feels like he can work with and can run the offense that he wants to run the best. And maybe that's Kirk Cousins. He's, he's playing terrible with the Falcons. So he might be able to think he can resurrect him. They have Michael Penix. They drafted 7th or 8th overall. I could see him being kind of like a bargain availability. And, who knows? That might be the route you go as you try to find the next young guy. But, I don't know if you could get Fields, if he has to be the starter or what, but between, a couple guys, and not, I don't know if any of the guys on the roster now will be, the guys going forward, for the Browns. It's just a bad situation to be in. Right now you're looking at a top 7 pick, and, it could go higher. And it doesn't appear that there's the type of quarterback that is a surefire quarterback. Yeah, there's 2 or 3 that are the best quarterbacks in this year's class, but nobody seems to have a consensus yet that they are franchise type quarterbacks. And so unless the Browns really like one, I don't see them just forcing the issue. So that leaves you with this pool of veteran guys. I don't know if there's anybody else, you could trade for, but I think they should do what they did in the Watson year, is turn over every stone and try to find a quarterback. It's a lot easier said than done. That's why it cost them so much to go after Watson. And they thought they were getting somebody close to what he played in 2020, and obviously he didn't.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Now I got to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, I'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
No matter what anybody says, I never thought I'd say this myself, but it's time. Stefanski's got to go. There are no consequences for all the bad play, penalties, misalignments. I mean, terrible coaching. Go ahead and get Vrabel before anybody else does. You can bring in a good coaching staff to solidify this team once and for all. Stefanski's just not the answer. I'm sorry. I don't know what it is with this guy, but he has no fire, and I don't think the team respects him because they don't get better. Every week, we got to get better. We got to get better. Well, you're not getting better. Who does it fall on? You.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Fred, I know the fan base is aggravated because what they hear. That is typical of a number of the voicemails that we get. Kevin Stefanski says we got to get better. He's trying to take accountability. Let me ask you this. You've been everywhere. You've been through practices, training camp. What changes would you make to the front office or coaching staff? Would you bring in a football guy instead of DePodesta? What changes would you make? It's been a disappointing year without question.
This is so many open ways you could make a case for keeping it the same. You could make a case blowing everything up. The biggest thing is, what are your options? Do you have a replacement that's better in place? I thought if you're going to make a change, Mike Vrabel is kind of an obvious choice, but maybe he doesn't want the Browns job. Maybe he wants to be a free agent. Maybe he has background, talks with other teams and feels like there's going to be some bidders for his services. Then again, he might say, I like it here in Northeast Ohio where I grew up and so forth. He was anxious not to step on any toes, and I think he's been great. But you don't know, I'm more concerned with the bringing in the talent. It seems like Andrew Berry has done a great job in bringing in talent, but then you look at the roster and the most notable players were here before he got here. And then you can argue, yeah, but his drafts haven't been very good because he traded, for Watson and had no first rounds or second rounds the last 3 years, basically. I think he had one last year, but those are 5 players that should be starters or Pro Bowl type players on your team. So you can make a case. Do you want to bring them back? I think at this point, I would say, guys, you got an extension. You're telling me that we're not as bad as our record. You've got this year to turn things around. And I think Kevin Stefanski needs to get a hold of the quarterback situation and work with Barry to find a solution to get competent quarterback play. If you go back to our shows that I did with you before the season, even last offseason, I said Deshaun Watson does not have to be an elite Pro Bowl level quarterback to get the Browns to playoff. He just has to be average. But he wasn't even average. And this season was torpedoed with that 1-6 start. And I think it affected the defense, special teams that all come tumbling down when they knew they didn't have a chance to make the playoffs after 1-6 start. And that's on Kevin if he really was calling the shots, making the decisions. And I have no reason not to doubt him why he didn't try something else earlier. So it's waffling on a lot of options, but if they don't get it right, it's just going to keep going down and down. But if you blow it up and start over, I can guarantee you it will be 2 or 3 years before you compete. Because when somebody comes in, they always want their own time, their own people, and it's kind of, there's a honeymoon period and they know it. They get a 5-year deal and you're starting all over. I need this quarterback. I need a new everything. And I think it starts with the quarterback. And I go back to the Steelers. They had a defense in place, special teams. The Browns need to focus on getting that defense back, whatever the reason it dropped off, and special teams with the kicker, and then get adequate quarterback play. And I think this team can compete next year.
Are there problems easily fixable in your mind? Or are they 1-year solutions as opposed to multiple-year solutions? That's probably a better way to ask it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, to me, a lot of it just seems to go back to quarterback. You could say they need a new offensive line, you need another top wide receiver, you need another game-breaking running back. On offense, I think the easiest fix to get back to the top 10 is on defense. I think Jim Schwartz knows what he's doing. So I think you make some adjustments, evaluate who you have, who you can be a top defense with and who you can't, and fill those holes in the draft as well as free agency, solve the kicking issue. And then on offense, a lot of it depends on where you draft. A lot of it depends on who's available. And the reason, they've started 39 quarterbacks since 1999, because it's such a difficult position to find the long-term answer. And there has to be some luck involved. So I just think that, I would address, I don't get paid millions of dollars to evaluate and break down what the problem is, but I can tell you just by watching that they need some help on the offensive line. There's a reason they weren't able to run the ball this year. It's not all on the line, but it's also not all on the running backs, but it's in concert. I know Bill Callahan made a big difference. I think you just got to find, some coaches to work with that can put in your offense, if it's Kevin Stefanski, and find something efficient. When he was in Minnesota, he took Case Keenum when he had to go in. 26 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. They went to the NFC Championship game with good quarterback play, and I don't think anybody would say Case Keenum's, the second coming of Otto Graham. So that's what I'm saying, is just find somebody you can live with, work with on that side, and it solves a lot of your issues.
Fred Greetham, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Fred.
All right, Dave. I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about as off-season goes.
I'm sure. We will be talking about quarterbacks quite a bit. Fred Greetham, make sure you check him out. Always great stuff. He is the senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. We're going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we're talking Cavs with Ethan Sands, Cavs beat reporter. Stay with us on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We turn our attention to the Cavaliers, improved to an NBA best 23-4 record yesterday after that win against the Brooklyn Nets. This is from NBA TV. Evan Mobley on the start the Cavs are off to and the reasons for it.
Kenny put a great offense in for us, and everyone's getting shots up on the floor. It has a great balance. I touched the ball, Don touched the ball, DG touched the ball, and then we just play out of that. And I feel like our ball movement is really what's got us where we got to so far, and we just got to keep that going.
You know, there's one thing to look at your start to the season like, oh, we're off to a good start. But the best start in franchise history, right? Your first 15 games, and then now 23-4, tied with the best start in franchise history. When you hear that, what does it mean to you as a group collectively?
It means a lot. The biggest thing is not to get complacent and think that it's over with. We got to keep going, and we want to go far in the playoffs. That's the main goal. So we got to keep that in the main focus and keep stacking days and keep getting better and keep blowing teams out like this.
Let's welcome in Ethan Sands, Cavs beat reporter from cleveland.com. Ethan, it's no longer early in the season. I mean, we're 27 games in. So they're doing something right. And, you know, you go back to Kenny Atkinson's plan, it was a pretty good one.
I mean, this is the first quarter of the season, so we don't want to say it's too early. It is a little bit early still, but we are getting to the point where teams are discussing what they're going to do before the trade deadline, all these different things, because there's moves to be made in the pipeline. Maybe not for the Cleveland Cavaliers, obviously, as we talk about the best team in the NBA record-wise, but when you talk about Kenny Atkinson being able to take his team back to his old stomping grounds where he got his first chance as a head coach in Brooklyn, it was a game where you could feel how much the Cavs players wanted to do it for their head coach. Also, not to mention that there are six in total people when it comes to the coaching staff and the players that have ties to the Brooklyn Nets organization before coming to the Cleveland Cavaliers. So it was a momentous occasion just going back in there and then to win the game by 29 points, be able to rest 3 different starters in the last quarter. It was a testament to them, as Evan Mobley said, not getting complacent. And it's something that they've wanted to do this entire season. And they actually got to finish the job off last night, get some acclimation and some good rest heading into another 3 days of off days, as they call it, even though they will be practicing over the next couple of days before they have another back-to-back against the Milwaukee Bucks and the Philadelphia 76ers on Friday and Saturday, respectively.
So one of those guys with ties to the Nets that you mentioned was Karis LeVert. Kenny Atkinson talked about LeVert after yesterday's win and just the way he's playing.
You know, that was a big part when I came in, is to make another push, and he's bought in. But even tonight, I felt like he passed up like 2 or 3. It's like, and his teammates are like, "Come on, Karis, it's the curse of the great ball handler." You know, like he's got such great handles, and his whole life he's been catching it and just like putting it down. Darius has some of that too. It's like for some reason they don't want to take the easy 3. They kind of want to make it a little more difficult. But it's changing his value to our team, his value for future contracts. You have to be efficient in the sport. That's what teams are looking for. That's what we're looking for. And man, he's turned the corner.
So, Ethan, I just figured out the key to Kenny Atkinson's success. He's telling guys to shoot threes. Who doesn't want to be told shoot threes when you have the opportunity?
Let it fly, let it fly, let it fly. I mean, they are the best ranked team when it comes to three-point percentage. They have been for a majority of the season. And let me give you some numbers because it is absolutely astronomical how well this team is shooting the basketball. And we've talked about it a couple times on this show that the expectation is for them they're shooting over their heads. So the expectation is for their numbers to come down. As you mentioned, we're 27 games into the season now, and you have guys like Isaac Okoro who are shooting 49.2% from three-point range, and then right under him is Karis LeVert, 48.8. The Cavs have 3 different players on their roster in the top 10 in three-point percentage in the NBA of players that have played at least 20 games, averaging 15 minutes per game. So you talk about all these different things, and then you look specifically at Karis LeVert, a guy that was trying to get into the lane, trying to get to his mid-range game this year, and you talk about a lot of that coming into the season, and he's changed. He's upgraded his game. Last year, Karis LeVert took 28% of his attempts from mid-range and 35% of his attempts at the rim. Then you talk about this year. He's taking 13% of his attempts from mid-range and 48% of his attempts at the rim. So that's a different number. It's a different shot profile. And Kenny had talked about in his previous years with Brooklyn when he had Karis LeVert on that team that he felt like he failed Karis. He felt like he wasn't doing enough to get his shot profile to where it needed to be for him to be successful. And you talk about last night's game against the Brooklyn Nets. It's only the 5th time in his career that Karis LeVert has knocked down 6 or more triples in a game, and his 2nd time he's drilled 6 in 1 half. So you talk about him being able to light it up from the perimeter, but also being able to get to the rim and all those different things. He's taken 6. I don't know what the number is for why the number is 6 for so many different things today, but he's taken 6 mid-range shots all season. That is exactly the different kind of profile that the Cavs wanted to see from him, and it feels like he's growing even at 30 years old. So maybe old dogs can learn some new tricks.
What about Isaac Okoro? We kind of touched on him briefly. What have you seen from him this year?
I mean, he's in so many different roles this year. We talked about how he's been able to shoot the lights out of the ball nearly 50% from 3, which is just absurd, right? And then you talk about him being a half roller, which means that he's setting screens and getting into the painted area and has the opportunity to use his strength and speed to either get to the lane and get to a layup, or he has the passing acumen to dish out to people in the corners or all of those different things. And now we're starting to see, as his reputation has been different for his entire career. He's grown as a shooter, but he still hasn't been respected when it comes to his three-point shot. Last night, we saw somebody finally kind of close out and respect his shot after he has hit so many this season. And instead of panicking and doing something that he hasn't done, Isaac Okoro went back to the game that he was known for when he was in college at Auburn, slashing, getting to the basket, going into a triple threat and going past them. Again, using that speed and agility that we know so well on the defensive end. It's become something that the Cavs have tried to lean into. Every single player is getting to their potential under Kenny Atkinson, whether it's talking about getting new freedom, being put into new roles, or anything else. This Cavs team is becoming full, and we haven't even added one other player to this team, and I know we're going to get to that shortly.
Yeah, right now, matter of fact. So Max Strus, we expected last couple of games we thought we might see him, hasn't played yet. Has there been a setback? They just being cautious? What's going on with Max Strus?
Just being cautious. It's nothing serious. The Cavs actually wanted to get some reassurance, and Max himself wanted to get some reassurance. He got some more imaging done on his ankle because, as we know, basketball players' ankles can be finicky, and we've seen it this season for the Cavs. I believe it's 6 or 7 different players have had an ankle injury already 27 games into the season for the Cleveland Cavaliers. But those x-rays came up clean, and now it's just about how he's going to be able to react to the other practice time that he's getting. So again, looking back to the preseason, right? He went out with a hip injury, trying to come back. Then he hurts himself in a practice or a training session on his own by stepping on a coach's foot and has been out since with that ankle injury. And now he hasn't been able to get practice time, all those different things, up until last week when he was starting to get reacclimated, working with the Cleveland Charge, working his way up to practicing with the Cleveland Cavaliers, who he practiced with 3 different times last week. Twice in Miami, once in Cleveland, and now you get another period where he didn't travel to Brooklyn with them last night. He's actually stayed in Cleveland, got a workout in, and we're continuing to see this ramp-up period because I think the Cavs understood coming into last week, we don't really need him against the Washington Wizards. We don't really need him against the hampered Brooklyn Nets, right? Two teams that are going to be trying to get the lottery picks to help their team grow next year or in years to come. They're not on the same team as the Cavs. But Max Strus coming into this next season, obviously there's more important games. We talk about the Milwaukee Bucks and then the Philadelphia 76ers, who are going to be without Joel Embiid with a sinus fracture. He's going to be reevaluated in 1 week. But I feel like this is a better week to try and think of when Max could return. Obviously, this is all based on no setbacks having this week, all those different things, and the idea that Max can be better when it comes to his growth period and coming back when it comes to his ankle and return process.
Ethan Sands, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Ethan.
Thank you for having me.
Ethan Sands, make sure you check him out. Cavs beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Always good and insightful Cavs coverage. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.